Here with Jack Markley of Beachmont Revere. Jack is a lifelong Winthrop Revere resident, lives on the Marsh, has this, as you can see, beautiful spot. We're sitting on his deck with Belle Isle Inlet and Belle Isle Marsh behind us. Jack, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with the Marsh and with the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh and how you got interested?
Yes, I think so. I moved here about 1980, moved on the Marsh. It was a swamp then. That's when things drifted down the creek, the residue of the dump and whatever. I lived here a number of years, and finally I retired and took an interest in the Marsh and started to appreciate it. I joined the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh and saw what they did. And what they did right behind us was the Belle Isle Park. They were instrumental in building that. Kind of saved some of the marsh so people can use it. And later on I put a boat in the water and then a canoe, and I started paddling around the marsh and really took an interest. And down the creek where the Winthrop Cemetery is, it used to be the Winthrop Dump. When I was a little boy there, I grew up in Winthrop in the 40s and 50s. They backed the trucks up on the marsh and dumped the trash out and lit it on fire. Occasionally they brought in a bulldozer and moved it around. No perimeter, it would drift out and go down the harbor or whatever. Well, later on they closed all the landfills and they capped off the dump and they made a cemetery out of it. They did not address the problem with the perimeter. I guess they didn't have to, or they couldn't, or whatever. But they're going to do that shortly because of people like the Friends of Belle Isle Marsh.
Another thing that I think people might find interesting is to talk about the Belle Isle Fish Company restoration site. You're pretty familiar with that because you've gone out there a lot during all phases of the restoration.
Yes, BIFCO, Belle Isle Fish Company, is just on this side of the old railroad bridge. It backs up to the T. At one time there was a boat club there, Belle Isle Boat Club. I don't know if it was a fish company, but they call it BIFCO, and it's City of Boston land, and I guess it was a hazardous waste site. And just this year they started to resurrect it. At what I'm familiar with, it was all a jumble of stone and concrete riprap to hold the banking. Well, they come in here this spring and they removed all that. They removed 8,000 or 10,000 yards of fill. They said it was hazardous or contaminated, and paddling out there and looking at it, I can see that it was, because when they dug into it, you saw all sorts of tires and timbers, and if that's what I could see, I wouldn't want to test what else was there. But that's all been removed, and they tell me they're going to make a natural slope and put in marsh grass, and if they're lucky it'll take hold and there'll be a pathway, it'll be open to the public. And they also tell me it's right around $1 million to do this. And it's not a very big area. And if you really wanted to see it, you could stop on the Belle Isle Bridge and look over, or you could call me up and I'd take you out in a boat and you could really see it.
Well, you know what you should talk about a little bit, what your daily routine is. I don't think people realize that you're out there every day cleaning up. And also you were just telling us about the difference in the amount of tires you take out every year.
Well, it's when I first started out there paddling around, you paddle around a few times aimlessly and you wonder why you're there. And I used to look along the bank, especially down here at what they call the key. It used to be the radio towers. Well, they call it the key now because they tell me on a flyover it looks like a key. But it's it's a berm out on the marsh, 550 foot to the side. Great big square berm, and it's right at the foot of Summer Street, and there's a path out there. If you had a mind to, take a ride down Summer Street, park under the no parking sign, and walk straight out. Walk around, and you can really enjoy the marsh. It puts you out there. Bring a cup of coffee with you. And if you want to, you can throw it on the path, and I'll pick it up later. But what I found a number of years ago, I'd paddle along there and I saw all this trash and debris, bleach bottles, plastic bags. And I often said they should clean that up. And I was forever saying they should clean it up. That and the tires and the boat cradles. And, you know, they never did come down and clean it up. And finally it dawned on me, they is me. And maybe you. They is us. So I started picking up a little bit of it just because it bothered me. And you know, in 5 or 6 years, I think I made a little difference. I don't paddle around the marsh aimlessly. I paddle around and pick up trash and debris, and I find that relaxing, and I feel good about it. Started out a few years ago taking tires out of the mud. Nobody sees the creek at low tide. A lot of it's mud flats. A lot of the tires, they all drifted off the Winthrop dump. They settle in the mud. You don't see them when you're out canoeing because you're out at high tide. I go out at low tide, I saw them, they bothered me. Well, I come along with a knife, and a piece of line and a bleach bottle. Cut a little hole in the side of the tire, tie the bottle to it. Cut a big hole on the other side. And I put out 5 bottles, 5 tires, in the canoe. Maybe I walked through the mud, but I could clean that off. Then later on at high tide, I'd take Mabel with me. She's the woman that we bought the house from. She kind of stayed with the house, and we'd go out in the rowboat. And I'd pull up on a bleach bottle, cleat it off to the boat. We'd go on the other side of the boat. Now it's 17 feet and 6 feet wide. We'd jump up and down, we'd break the tire out of the mud. Pull it up, the big hole on the other side of the tire, you could flush all the mud out. Took 5 tires in. The next low tide, put out 5 more bottles. The next high tide, take 5 more tires in. I stopped counting at 100. Now I find the occasional tire. No one is throwing tires in my opinion. These things have just been there. Once you take them out, they're gone. And as far as tires go, there's a section of the marsh over by the casket company. They call it Rosie's Pond. Now, Jeff Wood, he's the site supervisor of Belle Isle Park. He was telling me when they cleaned that up originally, that's over on the western side of the marsh, so every east wind would blow the tires in there on the big tides. Well, when the wind come out of the west, they were in the lee because of the buildings. They stayed there. He said when they first cleaned that out a number of years ago, I don't know when, they took 500 tires out of there. So what I've done is nothing. But if you look out now, if she pans out there in the mud, or you look at her video of low tide, I don't think you'll see a tire. And you don't see any bleach bottles or plastic bags on the marsh, because everything you pick up and you take out of here is gone. If you don't pick it up and take it out of here, it's just going to float around back and forth. And I find it relaxing.
Thanks, Jack. I hope you're talking about the marsh will inspire some more people to come out and just enjoy it on a day like this, either high tide or low tide.
Sure. But the tide takes about 20 minutes to continue going out. Low tide at 8:45, it'll be 9:15 before the current reverses.
Did you make that oar?
Yes, I had to. They don't sell them long enough.
Yeah.
I went to the kayak people. See how deep it is?
Yeah. That's it?
That's it.
Wow.
That's at a plus tide. Can you picture what it's like at a -1.5?
No.
You notice this paddle doesn't have one blade turned?
Yeah.
That's the standard, because when it's up, I'm pushing against the air.
Oh, yeah.
So if I turned one blade, then I'd have to do this. And you know something, I'm an old dog. I didn't want to learn a new trick. And I'm in no rush.
I'm Liz Regan. I'm president of Friends of Belle Isle Marsh and a Winthrop resident. I'm here today with Lisa Jones of Clean Water Action, which is affiliated with Alliance for Healthy Tomorrow. Lisa, can you first tell me about what those organizations are and how they're affiliated and what they represent?
Yes, I can. Clean Water Action is a statewide environmental group. It was founded in the 70s and was first affiliated with writing and authoring the Clean Water Act to protect drinking water and waterways around the country. And now we have a state chapter that's in downtown Boston, We work on many environmental issues, safe drinking water and clean water protection, but also air quality, reducing pollution from power plants, promoting renewable energy, and trying to get toxic chemicals out of our products and household products.
Now, what's your piece of that? What are you interested in, and what are you working on?
I work on this toxic chemical piece that I just mentioned. Okay. And that's where the Alliance for Healthy Tomorrow comes in, actually. Clean Water Action is a member of the Alliance for Healthy Tomorrow, which is a statewide coalition of over 150 organizations, environmental groups, public health groups, labor unions, faith-based groups that have all come together to try to reduce the amount of toxic chemicals in the products and the everyday things that we use so that we can protect our health and prevent disease.
That's a fairly large subject to cover. What does that really mean in terms of our daily lives? What are toxics? How do we encounter them?
Mm-hmm. It is a big order. It's a really big issue. I'll start by saying the reason that we're concerned with toxic chemicals is because rates of diseases and disorders are going up around the country. So things like asthma and breast cancer, learning disabilities, we're encountering them more and more and more. And medical research and scientific research is increasingly linking some of these diseases to our exposure to toxic chemicals. Because we're exposed to chemicals in every moment, really, of our lives, whether it's from air pollution or water pollution or just in the products that we're using, the lotion we put on our skin, the things we wash dishes with. A lot of these things have chemicals in them, and we're not sure how they're all interacting, and we can't yet say that one chemical will cause some disease, but there are increasingly links being found in various levels of research in various places. So that's why we're concerned with it. And we know that for a whole set of these toxic chemicals that we use, there are actually safer alternatives, and we could be substituting some safer alternatives for a lot of these toxic chemicals. So that's where we come in. That's our piece of it. You can't get rid of every chemical in the world, and not every chemical is going to be dangerous to your health. So we have identified a list of chemicals that we think are the most dangerous and for which we know there are safer substitutes, and are advocating both in our own lives, in people's homes, and at the state level, in the State House, through legislation, to try to require that these safer alternatives are being used.
Well, I mean, it seems to me there's a couple of issues there, and one of them is the issue of why are they in what we use to begin with? I mean, maybe they're an indispensable part of it. Is there any thought or research or any part of your work that's involved in working with manufacturers and corporations to look into other ways to make these things?
Yes, there is. In fact, in 1989, the state passed a law called the Toxics Use Reduction Act, which was specifically aimed at targeting industries for the toxics that they were using and emitting. So the state has done a lot of work and a lot of research on what alternatives are there and how can we limit emissions. Through that bill, the state set up what we call the Toxics Use Reduction Institute, which is at UMass Lowell. We call it TURI for short. And TURI is responsible for a lot of this research that you're talking about in terms of, where are the alternatives and are they feasible? Meaning, do they do the same thing?
Right.
Is their performance about the same, and are they about the same price? Because we don't want to cripple industry by making them pay for some astronomically expensive alternative. So TURI is doing a lot of research on where alternatives are available and where they're feasible, and then we're advocating for phasing those in where we can. So there is a lot of that research happening.
Do you find that, what is the status now of your work with the state and with, say, state and local regulations? You mentioned the Toxics Reduction Act. What else is in place or in the works? We have 3 bills that the Alliance for Healthy Tomorrow has filed that all deal with this safer alternatives issue and idea. So the big one is called the Safer Alternatives Bill. It's in the House and in the Senate right now. It's in the Joint Committee on the Environment. And that bill is kind of the overarching regulation that would say if there is a safer alternative for a list of 10 chemicals we've identified, then that would be required to phase in those safer alternatives. The first part of that bill is a lot of research to make sure that the alternatives are feasible and that they are comparable in performance. And it only targets an initial 10 chemicals, and then we will be able to expand it later. So that's filed right now, and that's one of our biggest priorities. We also have a bill on cleaning products that we call the Healthy Cleaning Products Bill. And what that would do is require safer alternatives to some of the toxic cleaning products being used.
it would require them being used in public buildings. So these are public housing, daycare centers, any state-run school or office building, something like that. And the reason for that is because a lot of those chemicals are linked to asthma. They trigger asthma attacks and can cause asthma in some cases. And so we're trying to just advocate for safer alternatives wherever it's possible. And then the third bill is called the Mercury Products Bill. This bill specifically targets mercury, which is a known neurotoxin that can cause learning disabilities and other developmental disorders. Mercury is still in a lot of thermostats and switches that we use across the state that are already in our homes. So we are working on, that bill would require that manufacturers, any company that manufactures a product that contains mercury would have to take it back and recycle it so that the mercury doesn't end up in the landfills or in incinerators. That particular bill is in the House Ways and Means Committee right now, so it's going through the process. We hope that it will be voted on by both the House and the Senate this year so that we can try to get that passed and reduce the amount of mercury in the environment.
Well, there's a couple of things going on there. One is that you have government support and that you can regulate these things, but thinking about it in terms of, you know, my daily life or the average person's daily life, how do you get people to even be aware that there are other alternatives? I mean, say I'm, you know, putting a phosphorus detergent in my washer. Is there something else? How do you get people to find out what else is out there? What's your education component? Or
well, that's partly why I'm here, actually, is to do some education. We have some samples of toxic cleaning products and non-toxic ones that people can use in their homes, and I can talk a little bit about that. And then we're, you know, Clean Water Action and the Alliance for Healthy Tomorrow are available as resources to the public and to people who have questions about specific products, or we could come to your community and do a presentation to educate people about alternatives.
And is there a, because I'm also thinking of what do you do with it when you're through, is there a disposal component too? Is there some way that you can advise people of cleaner or better alternatives in terms of disposing or recycling?
There are, it's a hard issue. I don't know that much about the disposal or recycling issue. Most communities do have hazardous waste days, household hazardous waste days, where you could bring your lead paint or you could bring some of the poisonous cleaning products that you have in your house, and they will dispose of them appropriately. The government will actually dispose of it. Other than that, though, there's not a whole lot of options. I mean, we definitely would say don't pour it down the drain. The important thing, you have to remember, everything you use in your house that you flush down the drain or down the toilet will end up in the waterways at some point. So don't throw it down the drain, and, you know, make sure you're using it in a ventilated area or using it wisely. But you know, for now, there's no real good recycling or disposal option for people who have a lot of these products in their homes.
Do you have a website by any chance?
Yes.
That people,
Yes.
What's your website?
www.healthytomorrow.org is the website for the Alliance for Healthy Tomorrow, and there's a lot of information on there about safer alternatives and about the 3 bills that I mentioned. And folks can also be calling their state senator and state representative to ask them to support these bills and do what they can to get them passed, which would make a really big difference for all of us across the state, not just in your own home.
Okay, now this is where the rubber meets the road, because it's one thing to talk about it in terms of generalities. This is what we find underneath our sinks, or not in the case of the environmentally friendly products. Can you sort of talk about each of these, because this is really where it affects people's daily lives and where we can have some control over it?
Sure, yeah. This is just a sample of some of the cleaning products and household products you may have in your home that could be harmful to your health. And I just want to say that this isn't an advertisement for any one brand or not for any one brand. And I don't want to scare anybody either, because it's not like if you're using this, then anyone will get cancer or will have an asthma attack. But research is showing that some of the ingredients in some of these can be hazardous. So it's just something to be aware of. For example, in bleach, this is some Clorox bleach, which almost all of us have in our homes. Bleach contains a sodium hypochlorite, and that can actually trigger asthma attacks and cause other respiratory problems. A lot of us, when you use bleach, imagine you're scrubbing your bathtub or something. And, you know, the bathroom is kind of a small room. We don't always have windows open. It's not necessarily the best ventilated place. So imagine scrubbing and breathing that in and how hazardous it could be if you have asthma or if your child has asthma. So that's one example. Drano is another example. This is a heavy-duty oven cleaner. A lot of these have scrubbing agents that can also cause asthma, and not cause asthma, but trigger asthma attacks or other respiratory problems. Drano, I mean, it says right on it that it's a poison. You know, if swallowed, contact your local poison control center, which is kind of a red flag for all of us. I think we all know to keep kids away from a lot of these products, and this is why. They do have really harmful ingredients. And then a toilet bowl cleaner is similar. It's harmful to our eyes, our respiratory systems, and a lot of these can cause headaches or dizziness or nausea, other kinds of symptoms like that. And then in the long term, what we're concerned with is if we're exposed to chemicals from all of these products several times a day, and they're in a lot of the things that we're using, then there's not really any good research about how that's going to affect our health.
The cumulative effects of that. Well, if we don't use those, what types of things can we use?
Well, I brought some samples actually of some safer alternatives. And these are, this brand is, you know, I'm not trying to advertise this brand, but you can find it easily actually in any grocery store. CVS even carries this kind of brand, so it's not hard to find. And these are safer, so they have mostly natural ingredients in them. These are, let's see, this one is a cleaner and degreaser. So it could replace any of the like dishwashing fluids, which we don't have any of those here. And this is an all-purpose bathroom cleaner, so it would clean your tiles and your sinks. It has a scrubbing agent in it that's likely made up of baking soda or something non-toxic like that. And they're also free of chlorine and any petroleum-based ingredient. So they're significantly safer. And this is a sample of dishwashing soap, the kind that you put in your actual dishwasher. So these are all biodegradable, so you can flush them down the toilet and down the drain without worrying about how they're going to affect the environment. They're non-toxic. I mean, you probably wouldn't want to eat them, but if you did ingest it somehow or get it in your eyes, it's not going to blind you or make you sick right away.
Children eat things.
Yeah, children do put things in their mouths. You know, it's still a cleaning product, but they are made with safer chemicals and safer alternatives that won't trigger asthma attacks or cause other respiratory illnesses, things like that. And you can find them at any grocery store, so they're a much better alternative. And then, you know, really, under your own sink, you actually probably have better alternatives to a lot of these more toxic cleaning products.
Well, you mentioned the baking soda.
Baking soda is a great option.
It's an all-purpose cleaner.
Yeah. It's an all-purpose cleaner. It's a scrubbing agent. You know, you can really use it to clean tiles, clean your sink with baking soda and water. It's a great option. Vinegar is also can be used as an all-purpose cleaner. And it's a degreasing agent even, so you could use it on your countertops and even some hard to clean pots and pans. So we have a lot of these safer alternatives in our homes. You don't need to go out and spend money necessarily on these fancy bottles, but just something to be aware of that there are options out there.
So it's possible to be both clean and green.
It is possible to be clean and green.
Okay.
Yes, and these work just as well in terms of, you know, getting your house clean as this more toxic stuff works. It works just as well. So your home will still be clean, and you know, and you'll be better for the environment and for your health. Yeah.
I'm just interested. You know, you know so much about this, and you clearly have a passion for the subject. Can you tell me how you got involved in this and how you got interested in doing this as your work?
Yeah, I grew up in Connecticut, in a kind of a rural part of Connecticut in the northwest corner. So always grew up with wanting to take care of the environment and protect animals and protect just the quality of the air and everything. So I was kind of instilled, I think, with those values at an early age. And then I went to college in Western Massachusetts and studied environmental studies, which is where I learned more about the policy and the politics and how individuals can get involved to really make a difference. I worked for MassPIRG for a few years.
Sure.
And through there learned more about grassroots organizing and how we can pull our communities together to influence policy, protect the environment, and then ended up at Clean Water Action. So I just think the reason I'm in it is because I love knowing that we can all make a difference if we work together to change policy and to protect the environment. And I think it's really important to just be educating people and talking to people about these kinds of issues. So I'm really happy to be here and to
we're glad
be
that
in the
you are.
community. Yeah.
And you know, it just drives home the point that we're always trying to make, which is that it's possible for one person to make a difference, and that we need to think about what we're doing in our daily lives, that we're intricately connected with the environment, and whether we know it or not or think about it or not, everything we do has an effect. So thank you very much for talking with us today.
Sure. Thank you.